The letter from the label had used the word opportunity 4 times in 2 paragraphs, which told Camille everything she needed to know about how much of an opportunity it actually was. She had reminded herself that the advance had already cleared and her student loans were not going to be sentimental about it. Nashville received her with 87 degrees of humidity and a shuttle driver who told her, unprompted, that she was going to love it here. She used the smile she reserved for students who handed in late work with confidence. The co-op was a converted Victorian in East Nashville that someone had painted a deep, complicated green, a wraparound porch, a corkboard by the front door covered in show flyers, handwritten notes, and a photograph of a dog wearing a cowboy hat. Camille stood in the doorway with her rolling bag, her laptop case, and her expression of careful neutrality, and told herself it was fine. 6 weeks, she could survive 6 weeks anywhere. He was coming up the porch steps with a coffee cup in each hand and a guitar case slung over one shoulder, slightly out of breath, blonde hair curling at his ears. "You must be the classical one," he said, sizing her up without being obvious about it. She took the coffee he offered. It was black, no oat milk, no honey. "Thank you," she said, giving nothing, and drank it without a word. The first session lasted 4 hours and produced nothing except a detailed map of every creative incompatibility between them. Wyatt wrote by feel, chasing a melody on the guitar, letting lyrics half form and dissolve, circling the song like a dog finding its place to lie down. Camille worked from structure, theme, harmonic framework, emotional arc mapped before a single note was committed. She had brought a printed template, not because she was rigid, she would like to be very clear about that, but because a container gave the music somewhere to go. Wyatt looked at the printed sheet she slid across the table, studying it with elaborate care. "You brought a form," he said. "It's a framework," she replied, precise and unruffled. He set the sheet back down with both hands. "It's got boxes." She looked at him with one brow elevated by a single calibrated millimeter. "The boxes have labels." He leaned back in his chair, one arm draped over the back of it. "I've just never met a song that knew what it was going to be before it was." She looked at him pleasantly. "And I've never met a songwriter who didn't spend the first 2 hours of every session rediscovering fire." He laughed. A real one, surprised out of him. And Camille felt the corner of her mouth move before she caught it. They stayed until 9 o'clock when the building manager knocked, both of them looking up from the same argument about modal harmony with the identical expression of people who had lost track of time. The second week was different, though Camille could not have said exactly when it shifted. It might have been Tuesday when she played him a chord progression she had been developing, spare, unresolved, a little strange. He went quiet in a way that was different from his usual talkativeness. He picked up the guitar and began to find the melody that lived inside what she had built. And for 4 minutes, the room held something neither of them had planned for. It might have been Thursday when she arrived to find a lyric draft taped to her side of the table with a note. "Tried using one of your frameworks. Don't tell anyone." She spent 20 minutes revising it before she realized she was smiling. It might have been Friday evening when the session ran long and they ended up on the porch in the thick summer dark, passing a bag of pretzels back and forth. He told her about the album he had almost made 3 years ago, and the producer who had wanted to sand everything interesting out of it. "Was it worth it?" she asked. "Took me 2 years to think so," he said, to the street ahead rather than to her face. "But yeah." She told him about the fellowship she had turned down, a year in Berlin, fully funded, and she had never entirely let herself be angry about the year she didn't take. She called her friend Priya from the porch of the shotgun house the label had rented her. "Give him a chance," Priya said, smiling through it. "I'm giving him a chance," Camille said, even, making the distinction. "I gave him 4 hours. A beat. He brought me coffee," she added, softer. "It was terrible." "Did you tell him?" Priya asked, laughing lightly. Camille's expression went very still. "I drank it." Priya said, "You know what your problem is. You decide what something is before you let it be anything." Camille held the phone a few inches from her ear. "I'm a composer," she said quietly, hearing it. "That's the job." Outside, a couple walked a large, slow dog along the quiet residential street. The distant pulse of music from the main strip came in on the warm air. Something was singing in the dark. Not music, exactly, just the nighttime sounds of a city she hadn't wanted to come to, coming through the screen door like an invitation she wasn't sure she'd accepted yet. The song came on a Wednesday in week 3, the way things come when you stop looking for them. They had been arguing, productively, which was their word for it now, about the bridge of a track that kept collapsing in the middle. Wyatt stopped mid-pace, an idea arriving. What if it's not a bridge, he said. What if it's a question? Camille turned on the bench to face him fully. Sing it, she said. I don't have words yet, he told her, honest, slightly exposed. Sing what you have, she said, steady and certain. He sat down across from her, elbows on his knees, and sang 4 lines, more shape than lyric, the melody doing the real work. His voice was lower than she expected in that register, rough at the edges. The melody he found was not the one she would have written. It went somewhere she hadn't thought to go, and it landed in a place that did something inconvenient to her chest. She played his melody back on the keys, harmonized differently than he had sung it, and watched his face change. Do that again, he said, very quiet, going completely still. She did. He reached across and played 1 note change, just 1, and it opened the whole thing up like a window in a closed room. They both felt it at the same moment. She knew because he looked at her at exactly the same moment she looked at him, and the silence had the quality of something that had been waiting. They worked until 4 in the morning. When they finally stopped, the song was wholly, undeniably real. That's the one, Wyatt said, the grin spreading slow and certain. That's the one we came here to write. They walked. Nashville, at 4 in the morning, streets quiet and warm and faintly glittering, the neon of the honky-tonks off or dying. They moved side by side without deciding to, the song still lived in both of them. He told her about the album he had walked away from, the significant check he could not make himself sign because it would not have sounded like him. Was it worth it? She asked, looking at him. Took me 2 years to think so, he said, to the street ahead. But yeah, she told him about the fellowship. She had never entirely let herself be angry about the year she didn't take. Are you still angry? He asked, looking at her directly, unhurried. She thought about saying no. The word was right there, easy and clean. I'm working on not being, she said instead, the most honest thing she had said since she landed. He didn't fill the space after it, just nodded, once, slow. She found she was glad he hadn't. They stopped at the corner where they would have to go different directions. Camille, he said, just her name, nothing attached to it. Good night, Wyatt, she said, steady, deliberate, placing every word carefully. She walked back to the shotgun house and sat at the small kitchen table and did not open her notebook. She just sat with the city coming in through the screen door. The label's A&R rep arrived in the 3rd week, a precise and cheerful man named Douglas who used the word commercial the way other people use the word good. His notes were surgical and wrong. He wanted the strange chord resolved. He wanted the bridge simplified. He wanted specifically to remove the 4-measure instrumental passage that Camille had written and Wyatt had called the emotional heart of the entire track. No, Camille said, the single word placed, not thrown, level, and final. The passage stays. If you'd like to discuss the mix, we can discuss the mix. The composition is not up for revision. Wyatt was very still beside her, and she could feel him not smiling, which cost him something. After Douglas left, Wyatt looked at her for a long moment. You know he's going to go back to the label, he said. I know, she said. That could make things complicated for both of us. I know that too. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You didn't have to do that, he said, low, a little rough with it. The next morning, the co-op was quiet. I made it for the song, she said directly, without preamble, both hands around her coffee cup. Something in his face did something complicated and quiet. You didn't have to make it for me, he said, trying to be careful, not quite managing it. She met his eyes and held them. The morning light came through the tall studio windows, warm and long, landing across the table between them. Something in the air had been building for weeks and had no clean name. I'm not good at not saying things, he said quietly, not looking away. You might have noticed. I noticed, she said, warm, the composure fully at rest. I don't know what the plan is anymore, he said, hazel eyes open, the most uncertain she had ever heard him. I don't know what the plan is anymore, she told him. The most uncertain thing she had said in years, offered freely. She discovered in that moment that she was completely fine with not having a framework for this. 12 days later, with the showcase 1 week away, she sat at the small kitchen table at night with a notebook open in front of her. Chicago was still there, her life was still there. The apartment, the teaching post, the routines she had built around absence, the way you build a garden around a wall. She picked up her pen and wrote one word at the top of the page. Then she put the pen down. Priya had said, "You decide what something is before you let it be anything." The night street outside offered no argument. She had spent her entire adult life making containers for things, naming them before they arrived, knowing what she would do before she had to do it. She thought about the 4-measure passage, the way it felt when Wyatt called it the emotional heart. The thing about architecture, she thought, was that it did not tell you what to build. It just told you what would hold. She picked the pen back up. Outside, the cicadas were loud. The distant strip was alive. Nashville at night, doing what it did. She wrote until 2 a.m. It was not a framework. It was something else. She was not entirely sure what to call it yet. The night before the showcase, they ran the full set in the empty studio. Just the two of them. The overhead lights low and the rest of the building dark. She played keys, he played guitar, and sang. The material had its own gravity. It pulled you in the direction it was going, whether you meant to follow or not. After the last note, in the quiet, he set the guitar down. "What happens after this?" he asked quietly, looking at the guitar. She knew what he was asking. "My contract ends in 2 weeks, she said, looking at the piano. "And then you go back to Chicago," he said, his hazel eyes direct, making himself hold the look. "That's the plan," she said, returning the gaze. "Has the plan changed?" he asked, the clearest, most direct thing he had ever said to her. "I don't know what the plan is anymore," she told him, slow, giving it fully. "That's the most uncertain thing I've said out loud in probably 3 years. The real grin arrived, slow and certain. "Yeah?" She looked at him, the corner of her mouth definitely a smile now. "Don't make it weird." He laughed, low and warm, and the room felt like the song had felt the night they found it, like something that had been waiting to happen, finally happening. The showcase was a small room on a Tuesday night, industry people, a few journalists, the kind of attentive silence that meant something. They played 4 songs. The strange chord stayed in, the bridge stayed in, the 4-measure passage stayed in. When it was over, the quiet lasted 3 full seconds before the room responded. In those 3 seconds, Camille stood at the keyboard with her hands still resting on the keys and felt something shift inside her chest. Something that had been braced for years, finally letting go. Wyatt was beside her. His hand found hers on the keyboard, just for a moment, his warm, guitar-calloused fingers over her ink-stained ones. She turned her palm up and held on. She did not know what came next. She did not have it mapped or labeled or contained. Chicago was still there. Nashville was still here. The song was in both of them now, permanent and unresolvable as a question that had been answered and deepened and asked again. She knew one thing. She was going to find out.